The affair that should have stayed secret. She thought reporting a predator would bring justice, but instead, the system turned against her. It began inside the marble walls of New Zealand's police headquarters, the very heart of law and order, a place built to protect the innocent, but where, for one young woman, the rules would bend around power, silence, and fear. Her name was never meant to be known. In official files, she's simply called Ms. Z, a 21-year-old police staffer with a quiet voice and bright hopes for a career in uniform. The man who would destroy those hopes was twice her age, twice her rank, and a symbol of the very justice she believed in. Deputy Commissioner Jevon McSkimming. He was charming, articulate, a man used to being obeyed, the kind who walked into a room and made others stand straighter. To the public, he was a hero. To her, in the beginning, he was a mentor, someone who noticed her when others didn't. He told her she had potential, that she reminded him of himself. And in a world where approval from someone above could shape your entire future, those words meant everything. But admiration soon blurred into something sinister. The boundaries between power and affection began to collide. Lunch meetings turned into late-night messages. Friendly guidance became personal attention. And in 2016, a forbidden relationship began. Hidden beneath layers of rank, reputation, and fear. Welcome to Crime Vault. If you haven't joined our family of crime detectives, please subscribe, like, and share so your friends can join our family. Now, let's go back to the story. Ms. Z told herself it was real, that he cared. But deep down, she knew the balance was wrong. He was the teacher, she was the student. He held the badge, she held the secret. By the time she realized how trapped she was, it was already too late. The relationship had shifted. What began as flattery now felt like control. He decided when they met, when they spoke, when she could be seen. And every time she tried to pull away, he reminded her who he was. "Don't ruin your career," he would say softly. "You don't know what this could do to you." For 2 years, she lived in that quiet shadow, half in love, half in fear, until 2018, the year everything fell apart. He ended it first, not with guilt, but with strategy. He went to his superiors before she could. He told them there had been a short-lived affair. He told them she was unstable, threatening, sending him messages that crossed the line. He made sure his version of the story was the first one written, and they believed him. Of course they did. He was the deputy commissioner, a man trusted with power over hundreds. She was just a young woman with a broken heart and a few unanswered emails. But those emails would soon become her undoing, because when she finally decided to speak, to report what really happened, the system she served closed its doors. Her letters, filled with details of manipulation, consent blurred by authority, and threats of exposure, were quietly passed along corridors, read behind closed doors, and filed under sensitive material. Instead of investigating her complaint, the same officers she trusted began to whisper her name. Weeks later, she received an official notice. She was under investigation for harassment, for sending harmful digital communications. Her own words, the evidence of her pain, were now being used as weapons against her. She walked into court in January 2024, wearing the same nervous composure she'd once worn at her first police interview. Except this time, she wasn't the one enforcing the law. She was the accused. The irony burned like acid a young woman punished for daring to speak up against one of the most powerful men in the country. He stood untouched, his career still intact, his badge still polished. And when he smiled for the cameras at another press event, the world saw only confidence, not the man behind the silence. What she didn't know then was that the real story, the rot behind the uniform, was just beginning to surface, because inside the Independent Police Conduct Authority, quiet investigators were already collecting files, tracing timelines, connecting dots. They saw the pattern, how every decision protected him and isolated her, how her case had been twisted, buried, and used to protect a senior officer's reputation, and how a culture of loyalty had replaced the duty of justice. But that truth would not come for years. Right now, Ms. Z was alone, branded a liar, stripped of her job, her name dragged through internal whispers. She had stood up against the system, and the system had struck back. The story of Jevon McSkimming and Ms. Z isn't just about one affair or one investigation. It's about what happens when power becomes the law, when a badge becomes armor and truth becomes a threat. He was 40, she was 21. He had rank, she had hope. He had the system, she had her voice, and soon, even that would be taken from her. Because in the months that followed, the police didn't just ignore her cry for help. They turned it into a crime. Emails that once begged for justice became evidence of harassment. Every word she wrote in desperation was read back in accusation. Every attempt to prove the truth tightened the handcuffs around her freedom. And somewhere in the polished hallways of the police headquarters, behind a door marked Deputy Commissioner, the man she once trusted poured another cup of coffee and smiled. They called them harmful digital communications. She called them pleas for help. Every word Miss Z had typed late at night, shaking, angry, terrified, was now printed on police letterhead, sealed inside a manila folder stamped evidence. The same officers she had trusted to protect her were now building a case against her. It started quietly. Her first email had been long, measured, almost apologetic. She wrote about the relationship, about how it had begun under pressure, about the night she said no, and he didn't stop. She wrote about the threats, how he warned that if she ever spoke out, the videos he kept on his phone could end her. There were hundreds of emails over the months that followed, some calm, some desperate, some broken. Each one a digital echo of the voice no one would hear in person. When she pressed send, she thought she was sending truth into the light. Instead, she had just handed the system its weapon. Inside police headquarters, whispers traveled faster than evidence. She's unstable. She can't let go. She's obsessed with him. No one mentioned that he had been her superior, her mentor, the man who decided her work schedule and signed her performance reviews. No one mentioned the fear that clung to her every time she walked past his office. What mattered now was the story he told. Calm, polished, perfectly rehearsed. He said she was harassing him. He said she'd fabricated everything to ruin his career, and the higher-ups believed him without question. In meeting rooms with frosted glass walls, senior officers nodded gravely and used words like protocol, reputation, containment. Someone suggested they make an example of her to show the department didn't tolerate misuse of digital platforms. No one asked why a decorated officer still had access to the same woman he claimed to fear. By the time the formal charge came, Ms. Z had already been erased from the building. Her security pass deactivated, her desk cleared. Colleagues she'd laughed with in the cafeteria now avoided eye contact. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like judgment. The email arrived on a Monday morning. You are hereby charged under the Harmful Digital Communications Act. It felt like being struck across the face by the very badge she once respected. She tried to explain, to anyone who would listen, that those emails were not attacks, but evidence. They weren't meant to hurt. They were meant to document. But the interviews became interrogations. The investigators didn't ask what he did. They asked why she hadn't moved on. They called her emotional, volatile, unprofessional. Each question carried a hidden message. We don't believe you. Her lawyer told her quietly, you're fighting a system protecting itself. And she understood then, this wasn't about truth anymore. It was about survival. Weeks turned into months. The investigation that should have focused on him became a performance centered on her. She learned the language of silence, how to breathe without crying, how to nod while being accused of obsession. When she walked through the supermarket, she caught strangers staring. The rumors had leaked beyond the precinct walls. Isn't that the girl who went after the deputy commissioner? Each whisper sliced another piece off her dignity. At night, she reread her own messages, wondering how the same words that once gave her courage could now sound like crimes. She saw anger, yes. Pain, yes. But also truth, raw and unedited. The kind of truth that makes powerful men uncomfortable. Welcome to Crime Vault. If you haven't joined our family of crime detectives, please subscribe, like, and share so your friends can join our family.